I've spent 6 decades watching Washington make promises about your money, and I've learned one immutable truth. When politicians announce official timelines for payment increases, you'd better understand what's actually happening before you celebrate or panic. Right now, there's considerable noise about February SSDI payments reaching $2,000 with claims of new Trump administration timelines. Let me walk you through what the mathematics and actual policy mechanisms tell us, because your financial security depends on facts, not headlines. Social Security disability insurance operates under statutory formulas that Congress established generations ago. The maximum SSDI benefit for 2025 stands at $4,018 monthly, but here's what matters. The average recipient receives approximately $1,580. That figure didn't arrive arbitrarily. It reflects your lifetime earnings history, specifically your average index monthly earnings from your 35 highest earning years. Now, could your February payment approach $2,000? Absolutely, if your work history supports it. The Social Security Administration applies a progressive formula. 90% of your first $1,226 in average monthly earnings, then 32% of earnings between $1,226 and $7,291, then 15% above that threshold. But here's where clear thinking becomes essential. No presidential announcement can simply decree everyone receives $2,000. That would require congressional legislation, appropriations, and fundamental restructuring of a $1.4 trillion program. What actually is happening in February? Let me tell you what's genuinely occurring, because understanding the machinery of Social Security is far more valuable than chasing rumors. The Social Security Administration operates on a payment schedule that's been refined over decades, and February 2025 follows the exact same distribution pattern we've seen for years. If you receive SSI, your payment arrives on February 1st. If you've been collecting benefits since before May 1997, your payment comes on February 3rd. For everyone else, it depends on your birth date. Born between the 1st and 10th, you're paid on the second Wednesday, which is February 12th. Born between the 11th and 20th, you're looking at February 19th. Born between the 21st and 31st, your payment arrives February 26th. This isn't new policy. It's the same reliable framework that's been operating for decades. And frankly, that reliability is worth more than people appreciate. Now, here's where we need to apply some clear thinking about what $2,000 actually means in the context of SSDI. I've watched financial markets for most of my adult life, and one pattern emerges consistently. People hear a number and assume it applies universally. The Social Security system doesn't work that way, and it never has. Your SSDI payment is an insurance benefit, not an entitlement that everyone receives equally. It's calculated based on what you paid into the system during your working years. Think of it like any insurance policy you've ever held. If you paid higher premiums over a longer period, your benefit is proportionally larger. The fellow who worked 40 years in a skilled trade earning solid wages will receive substantially more than someone who worked sporadically at lower wage jobs. That's not unfair, it's mathematics reflecting contribution. The formula I mentioned earlier, the one with the 90% and 32% and 15% bend points, that's doing something rather elegant when you examine it closely. It's progressive, meaning lower earners get a better return on their contributions than higher earners. Someone who averaged $2,000 monthly over their career doesn't just get $2,000 back, they might get something closer to $500 because of how those percentages cascade. Meanwhile, someone who barely scraped by might have averaged $800 monthly, but receives perhaps $700 in benefits, which represents a much higher replacement rate of their working income. The system was designed this way deliberately to provide a safety net that's stronger for those who need it most, while still rewarding those who contributed more. It's a compromise between pure welfare and pure insurance, and like most compromises, it satisfies nobody completely while serving everyone reasonably well. Here's what I find particularly important for you to understand about the current landscape. The 2025 cost of living adjustment was 2.5%. That's the number that actually matters for your February payment. If you were receiving $1,180 in January, you're now receiving approximately $1,720. That COLA gets applied automatically. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to apply anywhere. It simply happens. The Social Security Administration calculates this increase based on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, specifically the third quarter average compared to the prior year's third quarter. It's technical, it's bureaucratic, but it's also systematic and predictable. I've always preferred predictable systems over exciting ones when my money's involved. Now, regarding these claims about Trump announcing official timelines for $2,000 payments, let's examine what's actually within presidential authority and what requires Congress. The president cannot unilaterally change Social Security benefit amounts. He can propose changes. He can advocate for legislation. He can use his position to pressure Congress. But the actual modification of benefit formulas requires an act of Congress. This has been true under every president since Franklin Roosevelt established the program in 1935. The separation of powers isn't just civics class theory, it's the practical reality of how these programs operate. When you hear about presidential announcements regarding Social Security, what you're typically hearing is either a proposal that requires legislative action or an administrative change in how existing rules are implemented, or sometimes, frankly, political messaging that doesn't translate to immediate policy change. Let me walk you through what could theoretically get your SSDI payment to $2,000 because it's entirely possible for many recipients, just not through the mechanism these headlines suggest. First, if your average indexed monthly earnings during your working career were sufficiently high, you could already be receiving $2,000 or more. The calculation is complex, but roughly speaking, if you consistently earned above the national average wage throughout a full career, your benefit would exceed $2,000 monthly. Second, if you're receiving auxiliary benefits, perhaps because you have dependent children or a spouse who qualifies for benefits on your record, your household's total SSDI payment could easily exceed $2,000. The family maximum benefit can reach 150% to 180% of your primary insurance amount, depending on the formula. Third, some individuals receive both SSDI and SSI, supplemental payments, if their disability benefit is low enough that they still qualify for the needs-based supplemental program. That combination can bring total payments higher, though SSI has strict income and asset limits that prevent most SSDI recipients from qualifying. What I want you to recognize is the difference between what's technically possible within the current system and what would require fundamental restructuring. Increasing everyone's benefit to a $2,000 floor would cost hundreds of billions of dollars annually. The Social Security trustees project the combined old age, survivors, and disability insurance trust funds will be depleted by 2035 under current law. That's not political fear-mongering, that's the mathematical reality of demographics and current tax rates. When the trust funds are depleted, incoming payroll taxes would cover only about 83% of scheduled benefits. Proposing a substantial across-the-board increase without addressing this funding gap would be like proposing to drive faster while ignoring that you're running out of gas. It doesn't mean the proposal is wrong, it means you need a plan for the fuel problem first. I've watched dozens of administrations make promises about Social Security, and here's what I've observed. The changes that actually happen are usually smaller and more technical than what gets announced, but they're also more durable. The 2015 Bipartisan Budget Act eliminated certain claiming strategies for spousal benefits. That was a real change with real impact, and it happened without much fanfare. The elimination of the windfall elimination provision has been proposed repeatedly and finally gained traction recently, which would increase benefits for about 2 million people who worked in jobs not covered by Social Security. These are the kinds of modifications that actually navigate through Congress. Targeted changes that address specific issues rather than wholesale restructuring. For February specifically, what you should expect is this. Your normal SSDI payment increased by the 2.5% COLA if you didn't already see that adjustment in January. If there were truly a new payment structure taking effect in February, the Social Security Administration would have sent you detailed notices months ago. They're required by law to notify you before your benefit amount changes for reasons other than the annual COLA. You'd see it in your My Social Security online account. You'd receive it by mail, and it would explain exactly why your payment changed and how it was calculated. The absence of such notices tells you more than any headline does. Now, I want to address something that concerns me about these recurring stories regarding imminent payment increases. They create planning problems for people who can least afford those problems. If you're receiving SSDI, you're likely living on a fixed income, and your budget is probably tight. When you hear that you might receive $2,000 starting next month, there's a natural human tendency to begin mentally spending that money. Perhaps you've been putting off dental work, or you need new tires, or you'd like to visit family you haven't seen in years. You start making plans based on income that hasn't actually been authorized. Then February arrives, you receive your normal payment plus the small COLA increase, and now you're not just back where you started, you're disappointed, and perhaps you've made commitments you can't fulfill. This is why I'm taking the time to explain the actual mechanics to you. Hope is valuable, but informed planning is more valuable. There's another dimension worth examining, which is what changes are actually being discussed in policy circles right now. The Social Security Fairness Act, which passed in early 2025, eliminated the windfall elimination provision and government pension offset. If you worked in a job not covered by Social Security, perhaps as a teacher or government employee in certain states, and you also worked enough in covered employment to qualify for Social Security, you were likely seeing your benefit reduced under WEP. That reduction is now gone, and those affected saw increases in their January or February payments. For some people, this represented several $100s monthly. That's a real implemented change, not a proposal or a timeline, but actual money in actual bank accounts. If you think you might have been affected by WEP or GPO, you should check your My Social Security account or contact the SSA directly, because you might be entitled to both retroactive payments and higher ongoing benefits. I've also seen discussion about eliminating taxation of Social Security benefits. Currently, if your combined income exceeds certain thresholds, up to 85% of your Social Security benefit can be subject to federal income tax. Those thresholds haven't been adjusted for inflation since they were established decades ago, which means an increasing percentage of beneficiaries are paying taxes on benefits that were originally envisioned as largely tax-free for most recipients. Eliminating this taxation would effectively increase take-home income for millions of beneficiaries. It wouldn't change your benefit amount, but it would change how much of that benefit you actually keep. For someone receiving $2,000 monthly who's currently having taxes withheld, eliminating that taxation might increase their net payment by $200 or $300 monthly. That's the difference between a proposal that changes the benefit formula and one that changes how benefits are treated in the tax code. Both arrive at similar outcomes through different mechanisms. What I'd encourage you to do is this: log into your My Social Security account at ssa.gov. If you haven't created one yet, do so, because it's the most reliable source of information about your specific situation. Your account shows your payment history, your projected benefits, your earnings record, and any notices the Social Security Administration has sent you. When you read a headline about payment changes, you can check your account to see if there's any corresponding notice or adjustment. If the headline claims a change is happening in February and there's nothing in your account about it by mid-January, that's your answer right there. The Social Security Administration doesn't make surprise changes to individual benefits. I want to circle back to something fundamental about how you should think about SSDI and Social Security more broadly. This is insurance that you paid for through every paycheck of your working life. The FICA taxes that came out of your wages weren't some arbitrary government confiscation. They were premium payments into an insurance system. When you became disabled and could no longer work, that insurance activated. Your monthly payment isn't charity, it's not a handout, it's not something you should feel grateful to politicians for. It's the benefit you earned through decades of premium payments. Understanding that relationship changes how you evaluate proposals and announcements. When someone proposes increasing your benefit, ask where the funding comes from. When someone proposes cutting your benefit, ask what happened to the premiums you paid. The system has problems, significant ones, but the core bargain is sound. You pay in during your working years, you receive benefits when you're retired or disabled. The reality is that Social Security requires attention from Congress fairly soon, regardless of any particular administration's proposals. The trust fund depletion date approaches, and while 2035 seems distant, implementing changes to a program affecting 70 million Americans takes time. Responsible reform might include raising the payroll tax cap so higher earners contribute more, or adjusting the benefit formula for future beneficiaries, or raising the full retirement age for younger workers, or some combination of modifications. These changes would likely exempt current beneficiaries and those near retirement, because dramatic changes to people already receiving benefits or about to receive them create severe hardship and isn't politically viable. What happens in the next few years will determine whether your benefits remain stable or face automatic cuts in a decade. So when February arrives and you see your payment, remember what it represents and where it came from. It's the product of a complex calculation based on your work history, adjusted annually for inflation, delivered on a predictable schedule. If it's increased beyond the normal COLA, you'll have received clear advance notice through official channels. And if it hasn't reached $2,000, that doesn't mean you've been cheated. It means the headlines were describing proposals rather than implemented policy. And understanding that difference is how you maintain your financial stability in an environment full of noise.